Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence with psychiatrist Bernard David Beitman, MD. Dr. Beitman is the founder of the Coincidence Project. The project encourages people like you to tell each other coincidence stories. To learn more about Dr. Beitman's work, put Connecting with Coincidence in your web browser. You'll find his book, his Psychology Today blog, and the interviews from this podcast. And now your host, Bernard Beitman, MD.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Bernard Beitman, MD. I'm a psychiatrist. I've been trying to figure out how the mind and the brain operate with each other. There's a mind and there's a brain. How do they connect with each other, and how do they relate to the environment that we're in? Not just other people, but the earth and trees and plants and animals. I mean, we're more connected, and I'm trying to think about how we are connected. And I think coincidences help us clarify the lines of connection among and between us. And they're always changing. I mean, the intensity always changes. But to notice coincidences, you got to believe they're out there. And if you don't think they're out there, you ain't going to see very many of them. So one of the ways to get them more consciously in your mind, if you want to, is like tell each other coincidence stories, as Rachel and I are going to be doing today in our podcast. You can also read my book, just coming out very soon. You can pre-order it, but it'll be out pretty soon. Called Meaningful Coincidences: How and Why Synchronicity and Serendipity Happen. The order links are below for those of you on YouTube. So here's my story. I'm going to call it, for today, I'm going to call it the Uber story. And just by coincidence, I designed this one. The person in this story is named Rachel. And her name is Rachel Heron. And she was driving Uber when she told this story. She picked up a woman at the airport whose destination just happened to be the address of the apartment complex where her boyfriend lived. Earlier that day, Rachel had seen her boyfriend take his car to the airport to take a flight to visit his sick mother. She stayed with him the night before, so she saw him drive off. The passenger began talking about herself, saying she's in town to visit her boyfriend. She's so excited. She hadn't seen him forever. Rachel related to what she was saying because her man had just left town. As they pulled into the apartment complex, Rachel said that her boyfriend also lived here. Then her stomach dropped when she saw her boyfriend's car outside his building. She started burning up inside as the passenger said, "I think it's right here. This is his car." Uh-oh. The boyfriend came out of the building to help the passenger with the luggage. Rachel started hitting him, and the passenger started hitting her. Then the boyfriend tried to break them up. Finally, with her heart hurting, Rachel got back in her car while the passenger was still kicking her car. Rachel drove off with the passenger's luggage. She ended the saga with, "By the way, I'm single now." She got a decision out of that one. Well, our guest today does not believe in coincidences, and we'll understand better about what she means by that. Rachel Hill is a digital marketing consultant, content creator, instructor, and published author. She has expertise in travel and tourism industries. With a master's in business administration, an MBA, she has over 12 years of professional experience in campaign creation, influencer marketing, process automation, and data and analytics. She merged her expertise in tech with her passion for travel into a successful global brand with an engaged audience of over 30,000. Rachel has been featured in many press and media releases as an industry expert on Cheddar News, Norwegian Airlines In-Flight magazine, Lonely Planet, USA Today, and Huffington Post, just to name a few. Rachel has been out there for sure. I mean, she is quite a traveler, and it's part of the reason I asked her to be here because, as you'll see, Rachel, one of the things we've noticed about coincidences is when you're traveling, you see a lot of them. That's we're going to see that about you. So welcome to the show, Rachel. I'm so glad to be able to talk to you directly.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and to discuss this topic because this is very different from most podcast interviews that I do. So I'm really excited.
I can imagine. What do you think this is about? Just because I mean, we never met. I saw you give a wonderful talk for a leadership conference that I attended online, and ask you to join me here. What do you think this is about? Just because this is kind of new to you.
If I had to guess, and I typically don't like to listen to too many podcasts before I interview, to not get a prejudgment of the host. But if I had to guess, I know that you are an expert in your industry, so I think we're going to talk about the tie between the science, and maybe the mystics or the metaphysics of coincidence and serendipity and creation together. Or I might be taking it too far. I don't know. Maybe we're just sharing stories about things that we thought were interesting that kind of led us to a different path.
Well, it starts with that. I mean, it's got to be real stories, as you know. I mean, in the
Mhm.
travel business, you're going to tell stories about what happens, as well as more general statements. So it starts with stories. And the story I want to start with is that you wrote in the form, I don't believe in coincidences. So why don't you tell us what you mean by that?
I'm one of those people that feels, if we're speaking from a spiritual perspective, excuse me, that creation is already finished, right? And that life itself is a pick your own adventure book. At least that is my perspective. And so, whichever adventure you decide to pick, I think that what we call coincidences or well, let's just stick with what we consider coincidences aren't, I mean, they are coincidences, but I kind of look at them as signs and omens that the adventure that I picked, that I'm on the right path. If I'm thinking about it as a video game, right? Like as you go through a game there, or if you're playing Super Mario, and I'm a millennial, so I'm just going to use this example. But as you're playing Super Mario, there are points in the game where you get like bonuses or meet a friend who gives you some sort of information to help you make a better decision. And so you know what the goal is going to be. You know you're going to beat the game. You just have these omens, these signs, these serendipities, these moments, these coincidences along the way to let you know that you picked the right adventure or that your adventure is unfolding the way that you want it to.
So your idea is, yes, there are serendipity things that happen, and their major function is to confirm for you that you're on the right path.
Yes. Or it's confirmed to you that you're on the right path and that the things that you are creating are unfolding, or here's more information, here's more data, here are more bonuses, if we're going to use the idea that we're in a video game or a simulation, to help you make a better decision or to help you continue to choose which page you want to jump to in your adventure book.
Well, there's an element of decision making on the part of the player in this.
For sure.
That sounds like what people call free will.
Yeah, I think so. I think free will, we only have so much free will, but I
Agreed.
do believe
Agree. And not only do we only have so much, the circumstances vary the amount we have. And so
absolutely.
great. I'm glad to hear you say that, because I strongly agree with that. Some stuff, yeah. Um, so I don't know. I, it's an adventure. I love that you think in terms of a simulation,
Hmm.
and it's Super Mario. My grandson loves Super Mario. Uh,
Hmm.
love Loves Mario Brothers, so I have a little bit of trouble, a little bit with Super Mario, but I get an idea of it. You in this adventure game, we have some ability to choose.
Yes.
Tell us about that ability to choose.
So if we, for example, if we are playing Super Mario, we know that there are X amount of games on the board. Say there are 100 modules that you have to go to. So in the sense of free will, yes, there is a bit of free will of how you want to move around the board, but there's still the limitation of 100 modules, no matter how you move, right? So as you play each of these modules, or let's say we play a game within Super Mario, there's an option for you to explore these like secret tunnels where you can get, extra bonuses, you meet new people, you get new tools. And so I equate that to life, right? There's the option that you could veer off the path and maybe explore different types of medicine or travel and expand your mind in different types of ways. Or you can continue to play the game and just go straight through, and just know that you are going to get to the end point, but you aren't taking the initiative to or the decision to try to explore different avenues or explore different areas within this particular module that you have. So that is where I think that you have the decision, right? The endpoint is the same. We're all going to get out of here. Like death is is going to happen. But how do you want to experience the module that you are on? Do you want to just go straight through and live the life that everyone told you that you were supposed to live, where society said that you had to do, be, and experience life this way? Or are you going to make a decision um, within the context of the limited amount of free will that we have to explore and to gather other tools, gather other information, to have other experiences within that module?
Got it. Um, you can go straight through, do it the way
Mhm.
people tell you to do. You're still going to be dead at the end of it.
Right.
That's predetermined just by having bodies.
Absolutely.
That's just what we got, and they get older and blah blah blah. But the way you travel through it is your own decision, and I look for having more fun and learning stuff. That's
For
the way
sure.
that's the way I like to do it. I'm at the learning entertainment interface.
For sure.
That's what I like. Well, how are you doing it? What's kind of like your way of going through this thing?
So I feel you. I love to learn, and the way that I like to learn is through travel. So I found that I've and so even when I think about our free will or predestinations, right? Like are we predetermined to do or experience or have certain things? And growing up, I always knew that I was going to travel the world. In which context I didn't know, because my mind hadn't expanded that far. But the way that I like to learn was through travel and through reading, which allowed me to travel within my mind. And so I grew up as an only child, so I read a lot. And I also played video games a lot too, which is where I can kind of draw the parallel. But when I used to read a lot as a child, I used to read these books about, Egyptian history and all these different points in history or around the world, and I wanted to experience those things. And so I found that through reading I was able to expand my mind on history as an example, or how I thought about history as I got older, and started to travel in high school. I was actually in a international studies magnet program, which is again another point as I look back at my journey. Was it serendipity or was I supposed to be in that program which helped me become who I am today, right? Or one of those serendipity moments where I'm like, okay, this is helping guide my decision or which page I want to jump to in my adventure or how I want to experience that jump, right? So I would say for me, it's through travel that I've learned so much and I've become the version of myself. It's through travel because how I look at the construct of government or finances, socioeconomics, how I look at life is just really different because I've gathered so much data from around the world and from different people that I've met, that it's allowed me to have more than a few pages to jump through or jump to in my adventure, but I have like thousands of pages because I've gathered all this information and I see what's possible. So I say that to say that travel is probably my biggest and greatest educator in how I'm able to navigate through life. And it keeps me humble, and it keeps me always learning, and it keeps me always sharp and always questioning what I thought I believed.
You started into the travel business by knowing somehow that you were going to be traveling for your life.
Yes.
I mean, when you were
Yes.
young, you knew that.
Yes.
And I think that's really important, to be able to have that sense of yourself right from the beginning. And
Mhm.
where that comes from is kind of who knows where.
Right.
But you got that stuck in your head. I'm going to travel. My name's Rachel. I'm getting on airplanes. That's
Right.
like, you knew that. And then the question of, is it fate somehow? Are you destined somehow by some external forces, or already
Mhm.
pre-programmed by the simulation that this
Right.
is going to happen? Or is there something that you have to do with it? Well, there is something you have to do with it. You can choose this one or not.
Right.
You're offered something and you can choose. So there is that, what might be called free will. You could always argue that your choice is already determined, and there's no way of arguing that.
Mhm.
That, but you have the sense that we're in a simulation, a
Yes.
computer game.
And to your point, I think we're also offered a big decision, right? A big fork in the road. And I can say for me, at least there's big decisions or big, if I'm going to use coincidence, and since that's what we're talking about, I do believe that there are big coincidences or events that happen in our life where we can very clearly make the decision on whether we want to continue the straight and narrow path, or if we want to go the path less traveled, right? And can say for me, it was when I was working in corporate America and I had a nervous breakdown essentially. And I was like, wait, I could keep down this path, which is the path that is essentially chosen for me, that I was um that I was destined to do if I would have listened to my environment, right? And this includes family, friends, society. So all the things, or do I want to listen to myself and bet on myself and take the road that is the scariest, um, but that would allow all of these coincidences and serendipities to unfold, to continue to allow me to make decision after decision after decision that continue to elevate me, right? So if I would have made that decision, I still would have been working at my very amazing corporate job, making a lot of money, probably married and with 2.5 kids, but I can't imagine that experience over the experience I had now, right? But I wouldn't know about this life if I hadn't chose it, right?
One of the things that increases coincidences is to get off the path.
Yes.
When you break out of that bubble, and that can be lots of things, including major stresses in your life. But
Yes.
travel is one of those things that fall under the stress label, because you're transiting out of your usual. Not you're not you your usual is to travel, so it's a little
Mhm.
different for you. But in the beginning, in the uptake, when you first started getting to travel, when you were breaking the mold, then I would expect that there were a lot of meaningful coincidences, serendipities, that you were presented with, because you were outside of the structure. And when you're outside the structure, more stuff can come in that says, hey, maybe you could think about this.
Absolutely. I would agree, when you break out of the construct of your current bubble, or your current path, there are way more opportunities for you to make decisions, right? And they're not always these huge, grand, life-changing decisions. I feel like often there are these micro things that happen, right?
Could you
And
give us an example of a micro thing?
okay, here's an example. Um Okay, I like the idea of coincidence, or this thing happened and it shifted my life. So when I left my corporate job, I started backpacking through Southeast Asia by myself. So that was obviously super scary, although I had traveled before, being a young black single woman, um, flying what 16 hours to Bangkok, Thailand by myself with just a 30-pound backpack on was super scary, but I leaned into it. And one of the first few weeks that I was staying in Thailand, I was staying at this really, really nice hostel. Long story short, I was sitting at a table, happened to strike up a conversation with this guy who was from Ireland. And he invited me out for the day to do some exploring. And although I kind of didn't want to go, and not because of him, but because it was just so hot and humid, and I was irritable and hungry and all those things, and trying to kind of cool off. But I made that micro decision to just push through my little bit of irritation and hang out with this guy. And we became good friends. And when we got back, he actually was the first person to introduce me to creating products and services online. And that was how he was able to continue to travel. He was like 7 years younger than me and making money online and just traveling the world. And I was just admiring him so much, like, wow, you're younger than me, and you are living the life that I want to live. I just want to make money on my computer and travel. And so he would actually introduce me to his business coach. And that is how I learned how to take my skills and expertise online over a decade ago. And from there, I ended up creating, a brand that allowed me to be featured in all these things and travel to over 70 countries. So I would say that is one micro decision that at the time was so small, but it was like a domino effect of all of these things.
And there you were on your own at a youth hostel, and you did the thing that makes these coincidences happen. You struck up a conversation with a stranger. That is a fundamental story about how things happen. If you don't start talking, it doesn't happen because you don't know what might have happened. I was in Bangkok a long time ago and met a guy named John, and he and I traveled to Calcutta and Kathmandu together, but we didn't start up with a company together. It was just nice to have somebody to travel with in those places. Uh, so that was a much smaller one that didn't come up with much, except I had a companion, which was nice to be able to do. But what you just illustrated, a little discussion blossomed into what you wanted. And what I keep getting impressed with here, Rachel, is that you had a vision of yourself in the future, and you
Yes.
have made that baby happen. You
Yes.
have made it happen. And that serendipity conversation was a key part of creating the future you wanted to have.
Right. And now that I look back at this amazing journey I've had, I can truly say there were these little micro decisions that, to my point, they don't always have to, to your example, blossom into a business relationship and a Fortune 50, company, but it could blossom into having a companion to experience Kathmandu with. Like, when is the next time you're going to be there? So, those little things, and who knows, maybe he shared an insight with you that you've taken with you, that maybe saved your life later on. We just don't know. Um,
Oh,
but yeah, it's
he and I shared a story of going to a Buddhist stupa in Kathmandu. We
mm,
got motorcycles the first day and try to ride up the mountain, but they have stairs, so you
right.
can't go. So the next day we did bicycles and went up to this Buddhist stupa, and there was a life-changing event because we went in and there was a room with a lot of incense and little cylindrical places made out of what paper, like thin paper, with a place where you could light incense and meditate. But you could do that on your own in the room, so you could meditate together and separately. So we go, wow, this is what a feeling in here. And we started walking out, and some guy in saffron robe came down and greeted us as we were walking out of the door of that little temple. And he says, "The Lama will see you now." So here was serendipity. So wow, he was expecting us. So John and I go upstairs, follow this guy, go upstairs, and there's this big rectangular room with a shelf, high shelves, about 3 feet high, with different guys in saffron robes sitting on rugs on these shelves. And at one end, so we walk in there, it's like, well, okay, wow, man. So, okay, so at one end was obviously the Lama. So we're kind of standing in front of him. My heart was going really fast. I say, well, like, this is, hey, this is like, okay. So there's this very long silence, what seemed like long silence. And the Lama begins to speak. And the Lama says, "Would you like to buy a rug?"
Oh my God. Seriously? So it was a sales pitch the whole time.
Whole time.
Wow. That sucks. But what a funny story.
What a funny
That is
story. It blew
that
my
is hilarious.
yeah. There's a lot of cartoons about people climbing the mountain, and there's the guru, and the guru says it's safer to invest in bonds. Kind of like it's kind of I saw that afterwards. So it it was a cartoon that actually happened in
Yeah.
real life. So John, I don't know if I would have done it without John. So it was
Mhm.
like, you're right. He and I were able to share some experiences that I might not have done on my own. So,
Right.
and that was
And
enough.
then look at you have a funny story out of it.
I have a funny story out of it,
Yeah.
and more, but I won't go through that. But it's coming
Okay.
coming down the mountain. Reality really hit me, so in a bad way, but I did anyway.
Oh.
Anyway, it's another story. I can tell you another time, but I don't want to go through that. But it's like, well, I decided to ask somebody to marry me is what I did.
Okay. So I mean,
Which
shall we talk about it?
it was a bad idea.
Oh, okay. We'll leave it alone then.
Well, it's a longer story, but it turned out to be a bad idea. But that I got to know her through a series of coincidences as well. And that's
Mm,
another story too. My life has been a lot of what I'm just telling you, a lot of these coincidences. They're funny, and they're like not so funny sometimes.
mhm.
But when I hear about you traveling, and one of the stories that really stuck with me when you're talking with on Eon's leadership seminar, was that you were traveling around, and what sounded like I remember Missouri maybe. And one of the things that you've done, which I think is so wonderful and people should know more about, is that you have created a travel book for Black Americans or Black people to
Mhm.
find places to go where it's safe and comfortable to be. And that's a wonderful contribution to the Black community. And there was a place I thought in Missouri that you found that would be comfortable for visiting there.
So I didn't work on that particular book. That book is called The Green Book, and it's actually really old. It's from I want to say the 20s. And this we were kind of talking about it a little bit, but that particular book, the original book was back when Black families couldn't travel freely on the road. So they had what's called sundown towns, which meant that Black families couldn't travel through these towns after sundown. And so these particular guides were created to help them. So when I created my brand, I would say that was a part of the newer the Black travel movement is what it was coined as. And we were doing it in the millennial way of Instagram and social media, where we were sharing destinations, or I will say was sharing destinations around the world where I did feel safe as a woman, as a Black woman, as a Black person. So kind of looking at it as the new green book, like new destinations that you can travel to, that don't necessarily have to be in the United States, but there are a lot of places around the world where you can experience great food, great people, hell, even less racism and those sorts of microaggressions that we may experience depending on where you live in the States. And so I would say my brand was really big on, especially for women, places that we could go and where we could travel, where we could feel safe, where we could date, where we could have really interesting experiences. Like, I mean, I'm a scuba diver, so if you're interested in those sorts of things, like places that are great for that. Um, so I would say that was my contribution to the Black community specifically.
All right, I'm glad to clarify that. And it's still a great contribution, especially to Black women, to be able to travel the way you did. You broke the ground to be able to get out there in the world on your own, and show other people how they could do it.
Yeah, and looking at it now, I am retired. I call myself a retired influencer. So, I don't create content anymore. And so I'm like the one that's watching, social media and TikTok and all these things. And I always feel so proud that there are so many other content creators that look like me, that don't look like me, that come from even other communities that I'm not familiar with, who are traveling and creating content and sharing their experiences. And it's just one of those, and they're actually getting paid as content creators, where, back in the day when I was doing it, it was a new concept. So it's really cool to see that I feel like I was a pioneer um, in the content creation industry, especially when it comes to Black travel creators.
Yeah, that was the impression I have. It looks to me like you like to start things.
Yes, I would definitely say I was actually joking with a friend about this not too long ago that I feel like I'm ahead of my time. And to your point, like I always saw things for myself that I just had this trajectory and I knew that I was going to experience. So I think part of my mission of being here, part of my point in this particular game is to come and spark something and be a pioneer in, leaving a job that doesn't serve you, like traveling the world and dating a lot of different people to decide what type of relationship you actually want to have and experience. Traveling the world to decide if you actually want to live in different countries, right? Traveling the world to decide that there are other ways for you to merge your passion and your expertise together and get paid for it, right? So I think that me coming and sparking something and giving people the idea and really the permission is one of my missions for being here.
Giving other people the permission to travel and have adventures, to join
Yeah,
the adventure game, the Super Mario that is real life, and that you can
yeah,
do it and really have a good time. So,
yeah.
I mean, one of the most prominent set of coincidences that people pay attention to involve romance.
Mm.
It's like, hey, it was meant to be kind of thing, or was it? Could you tell us about at least one of those prominent romance things that you ran into someplace in some exotic place,
Mm.
perhaps?
I will actually, okay, I have one that's actually super recent. So before the summer started, I had this vision of what I called a sultry summer, right? Like technically we're still in summer, but I really wanted to have this beautiful summer. And when I said sultry, I meant sexy and sensual, and not in a sexual way, but like being in the sun, dancing, eating like amazing food, drinking good wine, like all the things that feel pleasurable and feel sensual and make me feel really divine and feminine. I want to experience those things. And I even said, I want to have like a little fairy tale love story. Like that would be cute too. And so I like kind of threw that out there, like that would be cute. And so let's fast forward. I meet one of my really good friends who lives in London. We meet in Portugal and we go to this really cool 3-day music festival. And at this festival, I meet this really good looking guy. And I call him my festival boyfriend because every day
How
through
did
the
you meet?
festival.
How did you meet him? I mean, that's the kind of
Okay,
that's
so
that's what we're talking about here.
okay, so the way I met him, my friend and I, we have our VIP wristbands. So there's like a special bar for people that have these golden tickets is what they call it. So the highest level ticket, okay, Bernie, because if I'm gonna do a festival, I have to do it well. And I'm also a little too old to be out with gazillions of people. So anyway, we come
Well,
to
those are important comments right there, Rachel.
so we get to this particular bar, so there's not a lot of people, and this a guy is trying to talk to my friend or strikes up a small conversation with her. They are chatting, and I find out this is the cousin, my festival boyfriend's cousin. And so festival boyfriend and I start chatting, and I initially thought I was playing wing woman, right? Like my friend is chatting with his cousin. He and I are just chatting to not make it awkward, right?
So
So that
it started with the cousin chatting with your friend.
with my friend.
That's, I mean,
Um,
I'm just trying to get
yep,
the
that's
place,
exactly what
the
happened.
way to turn. So again, how that happened, we'll never really know particularly, but
Hmm.
that's the beginning, almost like the Bangkok meeting. It's like that's where I pay attention to, is that
Yes.
micro detail, because that is it's the seed for the rest of it.
Right. And so to your point, the bar that we were at didn't have a lot of people because of where we were. And so that gave us the opportunity to actually talk without the crowds, without, to be able to hear each other. And from there, we had, with our particular ticket, we got to be in the front of the stage of where the music was taking place. And so every day we would enjoy the festival together, like the final act. And so it was just fun because we had so many things in common. He's traveled to just as many countries as I. We just had just a lot of things. We both lived in the same state at one point. And so it was one of those things where once it was over, I told my friend, I was like, oh my gosh, that was such a cute fairy tale. Like he was, very attentive and just really nice and, checked on me, every night that I got home safely. So it was just one of those really cute fairy tale things. We took beautiful photos during the golden hour, and it was really cute, and it was absolutely one of those things I wanted to experience. And I said that I wanted to have like a cute fairy tale story. And so I got it.
Your ability to imagine things and make them happen is phenomenal. I could do that on the football field and playing baseball.
Hmm.
That's where I saw my ability to do it. And I'm doing that now with the Coincidence Project, because I'm maybe ahead of my time too in trying to say that meaningful coincidences have something strong to offer humanity. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to get people to pay attention to them. So people have called me ahead of my time too, and I just see it. And I can see how you see things too, and how you help create them. It's having that image and then finding the pieces out there that kind of begin to fill the image that you've got already. So it's a kind of a subconscious thing to try to make it happen, because you can feel the vibes, you can feel the
Hmm.
sense, you get an idea of the cousin, you get the idea of the guy, and you have and it begins to match the movie that you've already got in your mind.
Yeah.
The way you can do it, I mean, I love the watching your mind in this, Rachel, and seeing that you can imagine, starting with early on in our conversation, where you said you wanted to travel the world, but you could also read and travel also. And
Hmm.
you are a kinesthetic person. You are a moving person. So I imagine you also like to dance a lot.
Yes. Absolutely. So there's a correlation between dancing and manifesting, do you think?
Yeah,
Cool. Okay.
I do, because to manifest, you got to act. And if
Mhm.
you act in concert with the music that you can't exactly hear, but it's the vibes of the present environment, where you're getting so that, as I can do on the dance floor sometimes, become the music.
Yes.
Once you become the part of the environment with your idea about where you're going, then it begins to open up in a very smooth way, so that it's easy to go from the next move to the next.
Right. And I would even say, to your point about how it feels smooth, that the decisions, those micro decisions we spoke about, will be easy to make, right? Because to the point about my cute fairy tale music, my festival boyfriend, I could have made the decision not to speak with him, right? Like I technically could have walked away and just been like, they're chatting, I'll let them chat and just walk off, right? And the cousin could have done the same thing, or the festival boyfriend could have done the same. But that little micro decision of chatting with him, and he's very good looking, very handsome, but he's not actually who I would normally prefer, right? So even in that particular example, it what I took away from that is that, just lean in, and if it feels natural, if it's something that feels natural and comfortable, then look what happened, look what would have unfolded. Because in other circumstances I probably wouldn't have you know chatted with him just randomly, right? Like it had to be an interaction, an intersection like that for us to have chatted.
And I enjoy the elegance of your description of you, and the elegance
Thank you.
of you and the movements that you're describing. It's really
Mhm.
quite beautiful. What I think might have happened with that, you have an intuitive sense with all your travel of what's safe, what's not, and also more subtle things than that. So just standing there near the festival boyfriend to be, you could feel something about him in addition to what you saw. You could feel something about him. So you picked up what's in his energy field. You had some sense of resonance with the similarities between the two of you without having to speak it. And you recognized that without knowing that you recognized it consciously. Just you recognize something. So in order to do what you've been doing, you've got to have a feel for your environment that is more than just a conscious recognition. I was running back a punt one time, and I missed, five guys missed me trying to tackle me, and I was good. I could just feel where they were, and I knew I could feel it, but I didn't know then I was doing that. And then as the sixth one was coming to me, I said, "Oh, five guys missed me." I got out of the vibe when I started being conscious of where I was. You know what I mean? So that's when I got hit really good. Being in the flow as you can be, you have to be in the flow. You have to go through the vibe. You have to be dancing. You have to be dancing out there in the world where you go to be able to make all the smooth moves you do, coupled with the images you have about what you want to have happen. It's beautiful.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
You're
And I
welcome.
would say it's like dancing, right? Where you feel comfortable, where you feel the rhythm, you move towards that versus trying to force things or try to listen to the music and try to step on or count, right? Which I think a lot of times we get stuck in our regimen of working, home, sleep, shit, and doing all those things, right? Like you kind of are counting the rhythm, or when you go on vacation, you're trying to rest and do all these things in a short amount of time so you can get back to counting. You never really feel anything when you're trying to consciously count or consciously move or be on step to whatever the instructor said or whoever the instructor is.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, let's go to the story of you and Eon, or Amalia, as she once was known, when probably was
Okay.
what the name you knew. And that, now
Yes.
let's talk about how we know Amalia or Eon.
Okay.
Um, I know her because she wrote a book called Synchronicity, and invited her to start talking with a bunch of people, including me, about coincidences. And eventually we consolidated into a board for a nonprofit called the Coincidence Project. And Eon, I'm delighted to say, this chose to be a board member. So she's one of the 10 board members of the group, and she brings so much talent and capacity and love to the whole operation. So she's been a great part of our development of the Coincidence Project. So why don't you tell us about how you met Eon?
So to your point, I know her as Amalia. And the way that we met is when I went, so a mutual friend of ours asked me to house sit for her in Mexico.
Where in
um,
Mexico?
in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. And at that time, I needed a break from life. And so I went in 2019 to house
So the
sit,
key thing there is a friend needed a house sitter and asked you.
and I needed a break. So it
And you
was the
need
perfect.
that perfect fit. Those lock and key things, some people call it, where it just
Mhm.
fits together so well,
Yes,
I love those.
yes.
Sometimes it's small things where a patient of mine is late, but I'm glad the patient is late because I had something to do, or they
Mhm.
cancel, and I'm glad they canceled because I had something else was coming up. Those are
Right.
small things, but it's there's this idea that, Rachel, that that what you're seeking is also seeking you.
Absolutely. And it has to find a way to you, right? So friend needed the house sitter, I needed a break. I go and house sit. And while my friend needed the sitter, she was there for about a week or so, tying up some loose ends while she was transitioning to travel for a few months. And so during that time, there was some sort of event, and my friend Claire and Amelia were already friends. She invited her over to the house, and I think we had lunch or maybe went to the beach or something like that. And she and I became friends. So once our mutual friend Claire left for the summer to do what she needed to do, she and I just became friends from there. And Amelia and I became friends. And from a spiritual perspective, she really helped me um, learn and grow, right? Like she is really powerful in her gifts. And so just being able to learn from her, we're both dancers. So being able to dance together, and to your point about flowing through life, and having a friend who I can actually dance with and who gets it, is how we met. And we've been friends ever since.
You're dancing still. You're dancing still. I let's go back to Super Mario for a bit, because
Okay, let's go.
because the idea of life being a simulation
Mhm.
is out there now, be, partly because the way human beings conceptualize the world is often related to how their machines operate.
Mhm.
Like computer was like the human mind think like the human mind. It doesn't, but there was analogies made, and for telepathy, we could imagine that the telephone is kind of a telepathic thing because you can hear voice of somebody who's not there. So who is operating, who is creating, how there's got to be something else. If there's a Super Mario game that we're in, like, who's making the game?
I think if we are thinking about a game, right? Um, okay, there's a few different angles that I have.
Go
I
for it.
think
Go for it.
who is operating me, I think that there is a higher version of me, right? Whether it's your highest self, there are some people call it, your highest self, your highest version of yourself, right? That is operating this avatar, this flesh suit, meat suit, or whatever um, people call it here. Um,
I like meat
on
suit. I call it earth suit, but meat suit's good too.
Yeah, so you have the player, right? I think a higher version is the player, and I, as in like holding the controller, and then I think we are the actual Super Mario within the game, right? But there are limitations within this suit, right? And the player is trying to, if you are playing video games or like Mortal Kombat, there's like different tools that you can activate, right? But you have to grab those tools as you continue to go through the game. And so as you grab tools, if you need it when you come up against a challenge, you can activate said tool. So I think the higher version of me is the player that is like, hey, Rachel, take the right turn. Here's a tool to activate. Here is a friend who can help you heal in this particular way. Here is a therapist who can help you become clear so you can make a better decision. These are tools that we're activating along the way. As far as the creator of the game, I think like any other game, there's
Well,
developers, right?
before we get to the creator of the game, let's talk about the
Okay.
higher self and the communicating with you, because I want to get to
Mm-hmm.
the creator, but that's yet a higher level of the
Okay.
discussion. The how does your higher self communicate with you?
So the way it communicates with me is I feel like at this point I've created a relationship where, or my intuition is sensitive enough, my knowing is sensitive enough for me to kind of hear. So sometimes I hear in an audible way, but oftentimes it's just I know that I know that I know, and nothing can shift me from it. Kind of like when I was a kid, I just knew I was going to be traveling, and it wasn't anything anyone could say to me that was going to knock me off of that thing, right? And there's typically, when we talk about our body, I feel a sense of safety in the knowing, right? If it's a confusion there, or if my body kind of feels tingly or whatever, and it could be anxiety, it could be fear, it could be a lot of things. But even through that, if I feel a sense of I can push through this versus confusion, I'm typically know if it's confusion, it's not my higher self. It's typically the limitations of my environment, or some other internal or external uh, function that is trying to stop me.
Sometimes
A virus, if you will.
sometimes I get intuitive messages that make me anxious,
Mm-hmm.
and that's because if I don't do them, I think if I don't follow this intuition, trouble will happen. So the
Mm.
anxiety drives me to be able to act more quickly, more clearly.
See, my response is typical is a little bit of the opposite. Even in anxiety, if I feel no confusion, like I said, for me, it's the confusion piece. Um, Not so much. I typically feel a sense of safety within my own body, typically.
The confusion might throw you up, but you don't feel anxiety. I thought you mentioned that.
I feel a little anxiety, but if it's anxiety plus confusion, then I know it's not for me. If it's anxiety plus clarity, or a sense of there will be a solution that will happen, I typically know that there is an out, or something in that nature, then I can kind of lean into the anxiety of there's about to be a big shift happening. But if it's anxiety coupled with confusion, I know it's not my
I
operator.
love that. Anxiety with clarity versus anxiety with confusion.
Hmm.
Right. I meant right for me. That's what I would also try to be able to say. I just published a post. I have a Psychology Today blog, and I just published a post entitled "On Hearing Voices."
Mhm.
On hearing voices, and it the subtitle was "Sometimes those voices can be helpful,"
Mhm.
something like that. And I told three stories, and two of them were people being told by what seemed like an external voice to move in a certain way, and had they not moved, they would have been dead,
Mhm.
hit by trucks in these two cases. And for me, it was like trying to decide, should I go left or right? And I had been imagining trying to be able to see a singer songwriter here in Charlottesville named Devin Spruill, And I've been trying to figure out how can I market my book in Charlottesville, just locally, because my book's coming out in a month or in September 6th. And I didn't have much answers to either one of them. So this voice, I'm out in along the river in Charlottesville, and the voice says, go left. Going right goes back to the parking lot. And I go left, and there's Devin Sproul about to play in an outdoor concert. And I meet a couple, have a good time with them, and we have dinner together next week. And without my saying anything, they say, "Would you like us to put on a party for your book?" So
Wow.
it was realizing what I wanted, something
Mm-hmm.
like what you've described, by listening to the voice. Had I gone right, it wouldn't have happened. Gone left, those two things did happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really surprised to see that in the first 3 days, that post got about 20,000 downloads.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. And for me, that was the fastest uptick that I've had in Psychology Today posts. What do
Mm-hmm.
you think of what drove so many people to want to tune into that particular post?
I think, excuse me, immediately I thought it obviously resonates with a lot more people than we realize, right? I also think now as our society is changing, some would argue that it's collapsing. I would argue that it's reshifting itself. I think, as above, so below. So as there is becoming a reshift here, there's also a reshift where people, if we think about our brains or this being a simulation or a supercomputer, um, there are tools coming online, right? There are different, if we're all connected to the same network, perhaps there has been an upgrade to the system and people are starting to hear voices, but they haven't, taken the time to really listen to themselves or meditate or, maybe talk to a therapist and realize it's not that they're crazy, is that they are connecting to this particular network and that you can actually use it to your advantage and not something to fear. Now, there are people who may hear voices and it could be a part of a mental illness or they're disassociating or those sorts of things. But I think what's happening now is that a lot of people are hearing their player now. I think that's what's happening. I think people are starting to hear their player because they cannot control it. They might be hearing sometimes other players or other um, things in the simulation that are trying to knock them off the course. And I think people don't know what to do with it now.
Two things: they're hearing their player, says Rachel, and the system's being upgraded. I just went from Windows 8 to Windows 10. So it's by the I was and even it's upgraded. But the idea that the whole thing is being upgraded now is a wonderful metaphor. And listening to their player is what I think's happening. I think this player has been talking to me. I hear trees talking with me too, and I think there are other voices out there that we can tune into. But because I'm a psychiatrist, I can say, hey, it's not always crazy. It's easy. I can get away with that with some kind of confidence because I have the credentials to be able to do it. So let's talk about that that player, and it's the same old question about who's playing the player.
Mm. So I believe that the player, the actual player with the controller is playing me.
I
Again,
don't mean that, but who's playing the player playing you?
so if we're thinking about a game, I think there's developers, right? Like
Yes.
every game has developers. So, who the developers are of the actual game or who is the player reporting to, like, why are you playing a game? What's the point of this game? Um, there obviously there's like layers to this.
Yeah.
Now, who is playing the player? I don't know. It could be what we consider God. But then I would argue that okay, if God is the manager of my highest self as a player, then who's managing God? If we're thinking about the hierarchy of any institution or organization, I think it could go out, out, out. But at the same time, I am kind of like, why even try to figure that part out when I'm just trying to get through the game? I want to enjoy the game as much as possible, because maybe I won't remember this one when I get out of here, because I'm jumping into another game to master some other aspect of myself, or my highest self is moving on to the next module in the game.
Well, my thing is to keep asking questions about how the whole thing works.
Mm-hmm.
And part of asking about how the whole thing works is around coincidences. How do they happen?
Mm-hmm.
And you're giving me some idea of how you think they happen. I think there's maybe an Earth Coincidence Control Office is one term
Mm-hmm.
that's been used that helps manage the players as they are running the game, because somebody,
Absolutely.
as you very well know, people who write code need to have a lot of information in the whole world of the code around them so they could bring it down to what the code they're writing. To be able to imagine all the interrelationships among and between people and things and weather and whatever else is happening around us, it takes a good mind to be able to master and play with that idea, and I play with that level. And I'm trying to answer the question of how we are interconnected, because we are interconnected somehow in this simulation.
I
And
would say it's a server, right? If we're going to go use computers, there has to be some sort of server that we are connected to. We're all like, if we think about the internet, or if we think about back in the day where there was like rooms of just like huge servers, if we're thinking in that particular perspective, there has to be one source of energy that we are connected to. Now, how, I don't know. I know there's, numbers and cheat codes. And I even think about that. If we're playing a game, there's always cheat codes to the game. So my questions are, what are the cheat codes? How do I get to the path of least resistance? How do I use cheat codes in my favor to make sure that I'm winning the game and I'm getting the most points, the most tools, I meet the most people, I help the most people that I can, before the clock is up, right? Before I have to get out of here.
what are cheat codes?
I think the cheat codes are, I mean, if we look back into ancient texts, I know there is a lot of cheat codes in the sense of, hell, meditation is a cheat code, right? Tr- Silencing your mind enough to allow your player to actually give you the information to move forward. That's a simple cheat code. I know that people are using these numbers. I don't know where the numbers come from, but there's numbers that you can write down, and apparently your subconscious recognizes it as some sort of code, right? Like how you're writing code for a program, and it can reconfigure your subconscious. I'm not sure if that works. I haven't really tried it. I mean, even if we think about qigong and reiki and acupuncture, if we think about candle magic or calling in other entities, right? Like, I think there are a lot of different codes, past life regressions, taking psychedelics. All of those are cheat codes in my mind.
How do you spell that? Cheat codes.
A cheat code,
Yeah.
CHEAT code,
Cheat.
CODE.
So cheat. I
Cheat.
didn't, because I heard chi like as in energy.
No, a cheat code. Like, when I think about Super Mario, I remember my cousin's mom actually bought us a book on how, I guess, I mean, I hate to say it, but how to cheat the game, like how it's a layout of the actual module, if you will, and all the places you can go to get the most points, where the secret rooms are, the secret tunnels, how you can essentially look at this map and go through and get all of the basically play the game to the best of your ability and get all that is available to you, so you can beat the game faster, with the most gold, with the most tools, with the most everything before you leave.
I call that being meta to the game. Is getting above the game so you can see how it's played, which means the rules that govern it. I do psychotherapy, so I have to look at how people are programming themselves and help them get to their, what I'll call a self-observer, that then can find a way through the confusion with simple ideas that make it easier for them to change.
Okay.
And that's my metaphor. That's my metaphor for a cheat code. I love this cheat code thing, because
Yeah.
it's
And
it's-
cheating meaning ways to bypass longer periods of suffering. Let's talk about it. I mean, with your expertise, you meet with clients, they are looking to fast track their traumas. They're looking to cheat their way. Instead of taking the longest route, can I cut across the grass? You know, when we talk about playing sports, right? Like, can I cut across the field to get there quicker, faster, sooner versus walking around the perimeter of the fields? No, if
okay, right.
there's
I was returning a kickoff and from the 3-yard line, and I was going up the right side, and in a moment of real quiet, with some guys ready to cut me off along the sideline, on the right sideline, I had a voice. I heard myself say to myself, well, John Green, another guy on the team last week, cut across the field. That's what you just said. He cut across the field and went and scored. So I said, I think I'll do that too. So I cut across to the left and went 97 for the touchdown. And that being able to be open in a quiet moment to that input from the higher self at that time is part of what you're being able to tell us we have the capacity to do. And that's a part of the cheat coding capacity, is to be able to do it more efficiently. And you have done it so well in your Super Mario game. It's so much fun to hear how you imagine and things happen, and you partly make them happen, and partly you don't, because they appear and we don't know how much is you and how much is blah, 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 blah. We can do all that, but I focus on the choices you can make, the imagining you can do. And now you're adding a nice phrase, the cheat codes, that can get us to do this a little, for me, a little faster. So we're coming to the end of our time, Rachel. And I very much appreciate your joining me and letting me.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I love hearing how you think and what your experiences are. And I think some of our audience will also very much enjoy what you're bringing to us as we think about our place in the coincidence world that I'm trying to bring to people's awareness. Sometimes I ask at the end, and I'll ask you if you want to, just tell us something yet more personal about yourself that might be fun for people to know. You've told us already a bunch of things.
Yeah, I'm thinking, what else could I say? Personal, like a fun fact?
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm trying to find something interesting. I don't like spicy food. As much as I've traveled around the world, I will not eat spicy food. So that limits my capacity sometimes to enjoy a destination, or at least the food part of a destination. I know that's probably not as interesting as
it's about you, and that's what I was asking for. And that just reminds me, in Bangkok, I had a chili pepper that was the hottest one I've ever had. Boy, they've got them there.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to handle that at all.
I didn't want to go back to that. I didn't want to go back. Well, Rachel, thank you very, very much for the pleasure of being able to talk with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
This psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, like a hologram of cosmic consciousness.